रति सुख सारे गतमभिसारे रति सुख सारे गतमभिसारे मदन मनोहर वेशम्।
इतिहास पुराणाभ्यां वेदं समुपबृंहयेत् बिभेति अल्पश्रुतात् वेदात् मामयं प्रचरिष्यति. The next is an avatara that is treated as an apurna avatara. We need to understand that incarnations of the Lord are not restricted to a certain number. Well, we might have often heard the Dashavatara, Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Nrisimha, Vamana, Parashurama, Rama, Balarama, Krishna, Kalki and so on. But avatars are plenty in number. They are innumerable. Have you ever counted the number of stars in the sky? They are innumerable. So are the avatars. And the Lord doesn't keep announcing or declaring it in every print media or digital media. Yes, now I've taken an avatara. No. The avatars that we know, maybe 20, 30, 40 or 50, whatever avatars we know of, are avatars to us, known to us, because the rishis through their austerities and tapasya were able to contemplate and foresee that this avatara who's born to Dasharatha as Rama is an avatara. This man who's born to Jamadagni Rishi is an avatara. This man who's born to Vasudeva as Krishna is an avatara. So there were rishis who were perceiving it, and they restricted their number to 30 or 40. They might have not known more, but while composing and compiling, they have reported 30 or 40. So the number of incarnations of the Lord are plenty, innumerable. And where do they happen? All throughout the world. He doesn't restrict himself to any geography. Well, I'll be born below the Ganges and above the Yamuna. I will be born below Narmada and above Godavari. I'll be born below Krishna and above Kaveri river. No, he doesn't restrict to any territory. We don't know where he's born now. He may have taken avatars. Maybe we don't have rishis like in the past with so much of austerities to tell us. So when the Lord takes so many avatars, there are certain avatars where the Almighty is himself. He is born himself to exhibit and disclose to us all the auspicious qualities and attributes that he possesses. But there are certain avatars, there are certain incarnations where the Almighty doesn't choose to be born completely. He chooses a jivatma, a sentient matter like us. He chooses to inject one or slightly more qualities of his into us and make us more powerful than an average human being. So if I were a jivatma, if you were a jivatma, if the person staying next door to yours is a jivatma, the Lord could choose your neighbor with some extra power. He may inject of his innumerable qualities and powers. He may induce one power, inject one extra power in that person. So the moment, even if he isn't born, the Almighty isn't born, even if a small speck of his Shakti, his power is injected in a person, that is also referred to as an avatara, but not a complete incarnation, not a Purna avatara. They are all called those incarnations which are not complete. They are apurna avatara and often referred to as Shakti Aveshya avatara too. So Parashurama or Balarama are such incarnations where the Lord chooses to induce one of his divine powers. He is not born. He chooses to induce one of his powers. There was a rishi called Jamadagni, and to Jamadagni was born a son who was very handsome to look at, so he was called Rama. This Rama was much elder to the very famous Rama of Rāmāyana that we know of. Since he came in the Vamsha, the lineage of a rishi called Bhrigu. This Rama of the same clan, born of Jamadagni, was called Bhargava Rama. And with the grace of Shiva, it is said in certain Purānās that he was blessed with a clone of Lord Shiva's weapon called the Parashu. So he was referred to as Parashurama. He always carried the axe with him, the Parashu with him. So he was called Parashurama. See, since he was the son of Jamadagni, he was called Jamadagneya. being the son of Jamadagni, he was Jamadagneya, being the coming in the lineage of Bhrigu, he was Bhargavarama, because he carried the Parashu, he was Parashurama. Despite being born into a clan that was meant to learn and dispense the knowledge of Vedas, he developed some liking towards using weapons and fighting. At one point in time, it is said that to keep up the words of his father Jamadagni, he even had to behead his mother Renuka. Parashurama beheaded his mother Renuka. Of course, there is an instance, there is a flashback to it, but here, whatever be the flashback, can it ever be imagined the son beheads his mother? Of course, this example has been used quite often, that the father needs to be respected, his words need to be respected, because Pitruvakya Paripalanam is so important. And the best example is Parashurama, who upon listening to his father's words of Jamadagni, even beheaded his own mother Renuka. To that line it may seem like an example, but when we read Puranas, this particular act seems very barbaric. So that's why I said, so when the Lord chooses to induce one of his powers, there are bound to be repercussions where that person develops a lot of arrogance, unwarranted, irrelevant arrogance, and that wrath, that anger will cause a lot of agony. So there is one another place, because later his very own father, now Parashurama's very own father Jamadagni, was killed by a king, a Kshatriya, and his sons. That king was called Kartaviryarjuna. So the moment he understands that his father was killed, he goes and kills that king, but he doesn't stop there. He starts on a holocaust, a massacre. So he manages to kill every possible king of every possible dynasty, sparing Ikshvaku Kulam, the clan of Rama, because Parashurama's mother Renuka came in the Ikshvaku Vamsha, so he did not want to kill something that was from his maternal side. So he managed to kill so many people, and there are instances, very gory instances in our Puranas, that tell that he managed to collect the blood of the various kings that he had killed, dug 5 pits, and performed the final obsequies, the funeral rites of his father Jamadagni using blood. So this seems very nasty, very barbaric, very gory. Probably Parashurama also, to some researchers and scholars, determines the uncivilized manhood. When humans started evolving, they were barbaric like him. So that's what they say. Whichever be the case, whether he is evolved or not, incidents around Parashurama seem unholy, and Parashurama later is shown his way. When I say shown his way, is brought down of his arrogance by Rama's humility. Rama teaches him a lesson and says, Parashurama, you have acted in the most barbaric fashion all these years, bring it down. So this comes towards the end of Balakandam in Rāmāyana. Parashurama's shloka, a small gist of how he was, goes like this. Krodhagnim jamadagni pīdana bhavam santarpayishyan kramat akshatramiha santataksha ya imam trisaptva kritva kshitim dattva karmani dakshinam kvachanatam askandha sindhum vasan abrahmanyam apakarotu bhagavan abrahma kitam munihi. So this is the verse that describes Parashurama. Now let's move to another avatara that coexisted with Krishna avatara. Parashurama coexisted with Rama avatara. Balarama coexisted with Krishna avatara. I did mention that Rama avatara was a Purna avatara, complete incarnation, the Lord himself. So alongside Rama existed an Apurna avatara, an incomplete incarnation, and that was of Parashurama. Likewise, Krishna avatara is a complete incarnation, Purna avatara, and alongside him existed Balarama, who was an Apurna avatara. So when we deal with Balarama, he was the fetus, originally the fetus housed in Devaki's amniotic sac, her womb. But Bhagavata Mahāpurana tells, out of the fear that they had of Kamsa, this was shifted to a surrogate mother called Rohini, who was also the wife to Vasudeva. So then this child who was born was very handsome to look at, was Rama, was very strong even at a young age, so he was called Balarama. Balarama was always probably you can associate Balarama with Lakshmana of Rāmāyana, because he was also an angry young man. There were instances in Mahābhāratam where Balarama wanted to make certain decisions. He wanted to get his sister Subhadra married to Duryodhana, but Krishna, sensing this, wanted Subhadra to be married to Arjuna, because there was a strategy that Krishna had devised that if Arjuna wasn't related to him, like how Duryodhana was, because Duryodhana's daughter was married to Krishna's son. If there was no relationship between Arjuna and Krishna as strong as how he had with Duryodhana, then helping him during the war times will be difficult. So he got Subhadra married to Arjuna. So there were instances like this. When it came for taking sides in the war, whether you are on the side of the Kauravas or the Pandavas, Balarama said, see, Bhima is my student and so is Duryodhana, so I choose not to fight in this war. And then later he comes when on the last day Bhima manages to fight Duryodhana and strikes him on the thigh. That is when Duryodhana was dying a gory death. Here comes Balarama telling that I am going to fight Bhima and kill him. How could he ever do this? Then Krishna convinces him that you cannot choose to remain a spectator all these days. When Draupadi was humiliated, you didn't go ask a question to your student, and now you come and ask a question. So we find Balarama as, of course, an important character in Bhagavata Mahapurana and in Mahābhāratam, which is an itihasa. But every now and then his decisions will be masked either through love by Krishna or through the strategy that Krishna devises. Something that's never told in public lectures, which you may get to read in beautiful Purānās such as this when you read it personally, is we come across Balarama as a drunkard. So he used to consume liquor to a large extent, where there were different behavioral patterns noticed in him. There is one instance where it is said that he caused a lot of havoc in Hastinapura and said that I shall ensure that I pump in more waters into Yamuna and the Yamuna waters will drown this entire city. So there were instances where he threatened. So Balarama is again incarnation. Probably you don't find too many temples for Balarama. That's why people ask, oh, he's an avatara, why no temples? Because he's an apurna avatara. He's just like us, we the Jivatma, but with some power. So here is a verse that goes on him like this. Pakkat Kaurava Pattana Prabhritaya Prasta Pralambadayah Talankasya Tatha Vidha Vihritayas Tanvantu Bhadraninaha Kshiram Sharkarayeva Yabhira Prithak Bhuta Prabhutair Gunaihi Akaumarakam Aswadanta Jagate Krishnasyata Kelayah. So this is Balarama Avatara. There were a few other avatars. He was born as a son of Kardama and Devahuti as Kapila, and Kapilopadesham, the advice, that is again an Apurna Avatara of the Lord, Kapila Avatara, where he gives a lot of advice and some morals as teachings to his very own mother Devahuti. It is called Kapila Upadesham, Kapilopadesham. There is another avatara where he comes as a crane, as a Hamsa. Hamsa is not exactly a crane. It is supposed to be a mystic bird in those days with some unique characteristics and powers. But since we don't see a typical Hamsa these days, we can equate it to a crane or a swan maximum. So he took the avatara of Hamsa. Vedanta Deshika mentions this, Hamsa Matsya Kamatadhyavatara Shata, because a bird is something that helps in getting her children out from the eggs through incubation, through her touch. She gives the warmth. That warmth is enough to incubate the egg, and the egg breaks and the oviparous birds, they come out. The chicks come out. So when we look at Hamsavatara, the Lord came as a bird as well. So we have seen him as a fish, as an amphibian, as something that goes in the marshes, as something that's partly animal, as somebody who's as barbaric as Parashurama, who's a dwarf like Vamana, who's a Hamsa, a bird like Hamsavatara. So Hamsavatara doesn't have a huge legend behind, but it says that this avatara was meant to dispense quintessential knowledge to Brahma and his sons, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanat Kumara, Sananda, and so on. So this is one avatara. There is another avatara which finds a lot of prominence in the Southeast Asian part of the continent. So there's Southeast Asia and the southern part of India, which this avatara is given immense importance. That is that of the Lord, where he came with the face of a horse. Horse is a Vaji or a Haya. So he's called Hayagriva, Hayavaktra, Hayavadana, Vajivaktra, and so on. So there are verses that describe that the Lord's incarnation as Hayagriva, is the one that dispenses knowledge to those whom we assume are dispensing knowledge to us. Lord Shiva, in the form of Dakshinamurti, gives knowledge to us. The wife of Brahma, called Saraswati, who is a repository of all arts and skills, dispenses knowledge to us. Vyasacharya, who has given us various scriptures, compiled various scriptures, is the person who is regarded as the bestower of knowledge. But it is said in various verses that all these three whom we assume as sources of knowledge obtain their source from Hayagriva. Dakshinya Ramya Girishasya Murtihi Devi Sarojasana Dharmapatni Vyasadayopi Vyapadeshya Vachaha Sfuranti Sarve Tavashakti Leshaihi. So who is he? He is the one who is a personification of bliss and knowledge. Because when there is proper channel of knowledge and we acquire it, what we get in return is bliss. So knowledge, right knowledge, good knowledge and bliss go hand in hand. Jnananandamayam devam nirmalas patikakritim adharam sarva vidyanam hayagrivam upasmahe. Swatasiddham shuddhaspatikamani bhubhrit pratibhatam sudha sadhrichi vidyutibhiravada tatribhuvanam anantaistrayyantair anuvihita hela halahalam hataseshavadyam hayavadana needi mahimaha. So this shloka tells that knowledge that we know of in this world comes to us through literature, through books. Either be it science, maths, or arts, it has to come through some form of knowledge, which could be books or manuscripts, and that has to be through sentences. And a sentence generally finds its root in words, and words, when they have the right meaning and they are put together, is when you get a sentence. Words find their base in letters, and letters that we know of an alphabet. So in the Sānskrit alphabet or the English alphabet, there will be vowels and consonants. So they are called Vyanjanaksharam and Swaraksharam, Hal and Ahal. So when Hal and Ahal, these two kind of letters, the vowels and consonants, are put together, they are called Hala Hala. So the neighing of the horse is akin to the sound of Hala Hala Hala. So our predecessors and commentators have said, when the Lord in his incarnation as that of Hayagriva, as a horse when he neighs Hala Hala, from that Hala Hala comes Hal and Ahal, which are vowels and consonants, thereby words, thereby sentences, thereby literature, and we get knowledge. So even in English we often say that let the truth come from the horse's mouth. So we always feel that the horse is always associated with knowledge, and here is Hayagriva, who's regarded as the storehouse of knowledge. So there is a verse that goes like this: Vishuddha Vijnana Ghanaswarupam Vijnana Vishranana Baddhadiksham Dayanidhim Dehabhritam Sharanyam Devam Hayagrivam Aham Prapadye. I offer my pranamams, my obeisances to that Lord who dispenses knowledge. Of course, let's deal with one another Apurnavataram, not a Puranavatara, but regarded as a partial incarnation of the Lord, called as a Vyasa. We have dealt with Vyasa to a small extent in Mahābhārata, critical analysis of the Mahābhārata. His original name was Krishna Dvaipayana. That's very special about Mahābhārata. The protagonist, the woman, is Krishna, who's Draupadi. The male protagonist is Krishna, who's Lord Sri Krishna. The one who has compiled all the happenings about Krishna and Krishna is another Krishna. He was also dark. He was born in an island. An island in Sanskritam is referred to as Dvipam. Since he was born in an island, he was called Dvaipayana. Since he was dark in complexion, he was called Krishna Dvaipayana. So here we have Krishna Dvaipayana, who was born of a lady called Satyavati, and the father was Parashara Maharishi. This boy had the unique ability to grasp philosophy and theology like nobody else. He was able to reproduce the tenets of the philosophy in such a comprehensible and an enjoyable fashion. Later in his life, he took up the task of demarcating the Vedic statements by their prosody and their meter. So there were certain hymns in the Vedas that were of a certain format. That format was called Rik. There were certain hymns in the Vedas that were more commanding in nature. It would say, do this, do that, do this, do that. So he put such hymns together. Likewise, there were certain hymns which ordained the follower or the reciter to sing. So he put them together. So the first he called Rig Veda, second he called Yajur Veda, third he called Sama Veda. Extracts of the three he compiled in the fourth, which is the Atharva Veda. He did not compose Vedas. He got the hymns together and bucketed them, put them in the right file, put them in the right name, right category. So this process of compiling and grouping them is called Vyasam. And who did that? It was done by Krishna Dvaipayana, to what he did to Vedas. So he was called Veda Vyasa. Veda Vyasa is the one who has given us Mahābhārata, who has compiled the various Purānās for us. And something beyond this is where he has chosen some of the most relevant and very, very powerful words of Upanishads and strung them together as beautiful aphorisms. They are referred to as Brahma Sutras or Vedanta Sutras. Parasharya Vachasudham Sumanasaha Dugdabdi Madhyodritam Samsaragni Vidipana Vyapagata Pranatma Sanjeevanim Purvacharya Surakshitam Bahumatim Vyaghata Durasthitam Anitantu Nijaksharai Sumanasa Bhaumaf Pibantvan Vaham is a verse that commemorates the service that Veda Vyasa has done. So be it partial or incomplete incarnations such as Vyasa, Kapila, Balarama, Parashurama, or be it avatars that were complete but existed or lasted for a very short duration, like a Matsya Avatara, Kurma Avatara, Varaha Avatara, Nrsimha Avatara, Vamana Avatara, Hamsa Avatara, Hayagriva Avatara. These are all avatarams, incarnations of the Lord, which were complete, Purnam, but they lasted for a short period of time. So for us to understand and relish the Lord's auspicious attributes, there is very little scope. We can restrict ourselves only to the time period where that avatara existed. But two avatars that go beyond this, which are Purna, complete in nature, but give us a complete picture of what the Lord and His qualities are one is Rāmāvatara of Rāmāyana and Krishna Avatara of Mahābhārata and Bhāgavata Mahapurana. So we have had the opportunity to understand these incarnations of the Lord in a nutshell. In our Purānās, besides dealing with the incarnations of the Lord, which we have often referred to as avatarams, there are delineations and biographies of bhaktas of the Lord. Let's see, for example, in Nrsimhavataram, we have the avatara of the Lord intertwined with the bhakti, that devotion that was exhibited by Prahlada. Likewise, we have Dhruva Charitram. What does Dhruva Charitram speak about? Dhruva Charitram is a simple biography of a little boy who aspired for father's love. But this love that the little boy aspired for couldn't be simply achieved because it was his very own stepmother who was a big impediment. So Dhruva Charitram has been largely or mainly defined in two places. One, which is Srimad Bhagavata Mahapuranam, and second is Vishnu Puranam. So here both Parashara Maharshi and Shuka Brahmam take us through the journey of Dhruva. So it begins with, you must have heard of the king called Uttanapada, the king being a very, very unique king because he was uniquely shaped. It is said that he had two of his legs above his shoulders, which means Uttanapada. But I don't know biologically, medically, if it's possible or not. What it could have meant is he would carry out actions even before he would make declaration of it verbally. So if somebody speaks about action speaks louder than words, he was a befitting example. So he was married to two women, Suniti and Suruchi, and he had produced sons from both of these wives. But he had a special love for his wife called Suruchi, and that love percolated into the son born of her as well, who was Uttama. And unlike the love that he offered on Uttama, he didn't shower that love on his other son who was born of Suniti. So it is said in our Puranas that one day the boy wanted to sit, Dhruva wanted to sit on the lap of his father as much as his brother was seated. So he goes to the father's lap. That is when Suruchi pulls him away and tells, "You are not born of me, so you cannot sit on the lap of your father." This hurt this little boy. Barely we come across him as a 4-year-old boy. This has been summarized by one poet who says, Uttanapada nripater manunandanasya jayaba bhuva suruchir niratama bhishta anya sunitiriti bhartur nadritasa tvameva nityamagatim sharanam gatabhut. So this boy, when he was insulted, humiliated, we may not want to use those words like humiliation for a 4-year-old boy, but imagine what kind of turmoil the boy would have undergone. Because at a later point, one of the Telugu poets tell us that the words of Suruchi was so very powerful and hurtful that it was as if an iron trident were to be heated in blazing fire and to be inserted into one's ears. So this boy goes seeking solace from his mother Suniti, and Suniti is helpless. She tells the only journey for you to, or the only way for you to receive this paternal love that you're aspiring for, my dear son, is only when you seek the grace of the eternal father of this universe, who is Narayana. That is when this boy starts spending a lot of his time on penances. So we have two different versions. We have one Purana that tells that sage Narad guided him, and the other Purana that tells that Sapta Rishis guided him. In either case, they all advised him to seek the grace of the Lord. So this boy goes into penance. He goes into the forest and he starts performing severe penance. And the details of his penance, like how he stood in Panchagni and how he used to consume only tubers and roots and then only water and then only lived on air. All this has been mentioned in the Puranas. Now, when the Lord appears in front of him is the climax, or probably the pinnacle or the zenith of his devotion. The Lord appears. So this boy intended to ask for boons, but when he looks at the Lord, the resplendence, the beauty, the radiance, the boy doesn't find the right words to stitch, make sentences and produce it to the Lord. He's just choked in emotions. That is when we have a very important phrase that says, Kapola Deshe, the Lord who used his Shankasparsham hand to touch the boy's cheek. So this Dhruva Charitram, from the journey of the boy being humiliated, feeling hurt, then to performing penance, and finally the Lord appearing in front of him and embracing him, has a moral for us. That the Purana itself has something to say. That do not feel orphaned or left out when things around you don't work the way you want it to work. Not every relationship that we know of, or probably every relationship we know of in this world, be it between the husband and wife, or between the daughter and her mother and father, son and the mother and father, various relationships, they're all temporary in nature. When we say temporary, I know the amount of unconditional love that a mother would like to shower, a father would like to shower, a husband and the wife would like to shower for each other. But at one point in time, one will have to lose the other. So in such cases, Puranas have a very contemporary thought, then always fall upon the eternal shoulders of the Lord. He's always going to be there with you. He's going to sojourn with you. So the boy asks for boons. What comes out of it is description that we will deal in when we do a Bhagavata Saptaham in a traditional manner. But what comes out of it is very simple. That the Lord is always there with us. This paternal love, the omnipresence of the Lord, the Sarva Vyapakatvam of the Lord is what Dhruva Charitram entitles. And we must remember this. You know, I'm very, very knowingly using the word remember. You know why? Because with this continuous remembrance of the Lord by this little boy, from then on, from his lifetime onwards, if some scholar had to tell his Sishya, remember this, you know what would be the word he uses? He would say, Dhruva Smritihi. Have the Smriti, the remembrance, like Dhruva. So Dhruva became a simile for consistent, uninterrupted, unadulterated, consistent remembrance. So I would urge you all, remember what you've listened now, and remember to everything that you're listening to this in this course. Because this course is going to take us very, very close to what being a Bharatiya is, what our Puranas have to actually tell us. This is a very, very interesting narration offered by our Puranas, especially the Bhagavata Mahapurana. This incident has an incarnation in it. It also has the role of a very devout animal. Humans are also animals. We call ourselves social animals. Here we are going to deal with a very, very loving animal, the elephant. It may seem like one of the Panchatantra stories which the grandparents would like to tell their children, but there is a binding philosophy behind this. This is that of Gajendra Moksha Vrittantam. And this majorly comes in Bhagavata Mahapuranam. Other Puranas may include similes of this narration. So we do not know the exact place where it happened, but we know one thing for sure, it must have happened very close to the Trikuta Parvatam, because that's what Bhagavatam tells us. So we have the narration that goes like this. There was a beautiful pond filled with lotuses and lilies. And it seems that a male elephant would come very close to the lake to consume water along with a herd of female elephants. The description seems very spicy. So he would come and then he would consume the waters. Simple narration. Then comes a day when this male elephant wanted to prove his prowess, his valor to the female elephants. Isn't that very natural of the humans as well? The hero would always like to showcase to the heroine, the female protagonist. So this elephant puts his feet into the lake waters to pluck one of the flowers. Simple process. While he does so, apparently a crocodile, a very, very strong and a violent one, catches hold of this elephant's foot. So what happens next is very simple. So the elephant tries to fight the crocodile. You will hear narrations of
The traditional scholars, even my narration, would say they fought for 500 years and 1,000 years. So that's a description, it's a hyperbole. What it means is the elephant wanted to rescue itself from the clutches, from the jaws of this violent crocodile. It tried fighting. Now it's a very simple fight. If you happen to have one of your holidays and you go within the country to one of the national parks, or you go to Africa especially, you will find this incident very, very common. If you just Google it out, you will find the elephant or some other animal being caught in the jaws of a crocodile. But what happens next? So the Purana tells that this elephant tried to get itself relieved from the jaws of the crocodile. Nevertheless, at one point in time when it knew it would fail, it remembered the Lord. Now, this is not something very common that you find, an elephant thinking of the Lord. And then we have something like the Gajendra Moksha Vrittantam. I will just read out a few verses from the Stuti of Gajendra. Namo Bhagavate Tasmai Yetadichada Chidatmakam Purushaya Adi Bijaya Pareshaya Bhidimahi. So goes the Gajendra Stuti. So the elephant is trying to praise the omnipresent Lord, the omniscient Lord, the all-pervading Lord. Oh Lord, who is the cause of this entire universe, but the one with no cause. Please come and rescue me. Adi Bijaya, Avyaktaya, Paraya, Paramapurushaya. It states. Now there are 2-3 questions that we need to logically answer. We know that animals do communicate amongst themselves, and they have a unique way of communication. They are not bothered about our languages. We shouldn't be bothered about their languages, but something very unique. We hear this elephant speaking in Sānskrit. How is that possible? So in a narration, it may seem very, very devotion inspiring, bhakti inspiring incident, but we have a very logical question. I'm sure your children or grandchildren should ask you, how could an elephant speak in Sanskrit? Imagine an elephant. This is not a cartoon movie. We are not looking at the Lion King. So how could an elephant speak? Remember that the incident has happened in the past. It has been narrated to us by a human being. So let's imagine I have a pet at home. It could be a Labrador, it could be a cat. So when I look at the animal, as the person who's its master, technically we call the person the master. I'm looking at the pet, the one that I'm domesticating. I'm looking at the dog and I'm saying, are you hungry now? Can I give you something? Did the dog ever open its mouth and say, I'm hungry? Did it ever write and show? Did it even express? I know as a master, though we belong to 2 different categories, that is a dog family, I am from the Homo sapiens, I know, but still with the experience that I've garnered over years, moving with my pet, I know when she's hungry, I know when she would like to go out, I know when she's hurt, I know when she's moody. So we develop the art of deciphering the language, the communication of an animal that we are domesticating. Likewise, our rishis had the ability to dwell into the hearts, the minds of animals and understand what they were speaking. So that thought process which would have happened in the elephant's mind would have been communicated to bhaktas like us in the form of a Sanskrit shloka. So a Sanskrit shloka necessarily need not be the one that the elephant sung, but it had a certain thought. That thought has been translated into a shloka by Shuka Brahma. Point number 1. Point number 2. Even if it's an animal, how will it know to remember the Lord? Here is where we need to understand this point. I will talk about this in detail in level 2 when I discuss Vedanta. So in Vedanta, we talk about the means to reach the Paramatma, the Jivatma reaching the Paramatma. So the means, the path, the route taken is called as upayam. So upayam is the journey that I have to reach the Paramatma. So this upayam is multifold, but the 32 Brahma Vidyas have one Vidya which is Bhakti Yoga, which is called sadhana or upasana. So Bhakti Yoga has its own set of pros and cons, has its own terms and conditions. One of it is, for example, in this material body, Pancha Bhautika Shariram, my Jivatma is resting. In this Janma, let's imagine that I read up the scriptures. To reach the Paramatma, I understand one of the very recommended ways is Bhakti Yoga, and I begin practicing Bhakti Yoga. because I have to practice bhakti yoga, because that is a means. So the moment I start practicing bhakti yoga, I'm sure at its culmination, I will receive moksha, the ability or the state where I'm never born again. But that moksha is assured at the culmination of bhakti yoga, not necessarily in this janma, not in this birth necessarily. I may get it, I may not. So I begin bhakti yoga in this janma, in this sharira. I continue. In this process of continuing bhakti yoga, it may so happen that I may take multiple janmas. In this janma, I've been born into a family in the South Indian household. I know who my parents are. I know who my wife is. I know who my child is. I know my kith and kin. I know my friends. I know what I'm speaking. Imagine at the end of this janma, the Jivatma has to depart the material body. It will go into the material body of some other janma. It could that be of a human being. It could be a human being in a different geography. It could be that of an animal in the same geography, an animal in a different geography. There'll be a waiting period maybe for me to receive the material body. In either case, let's imagine this Jivatma, which has started Bhakti Yoga, at the end of this Janma, leaves and goes to that of a dog. Simple. I'm a puppy then. I'm resting in the mother's womb. From the female dog, I'm getting out as a puppy. Remember that in that Janma of the dog, there is high probability that I will continue the Bhakti Yoga. I will continue. When I say continue, I need to practice Ashtanga Yoga. So I remember to continue Bhakti Yoga, but I will not be able to practice, because for practicing Bhakti Yoga, I need to have a very good mastery over Ashtanga Yoga. But I will know that Bhakti Yoga has to be continued. Do not confuse the word Bhakti, which is devotion, with Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is a sincere practice interspersed with Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. It's Ashtanga Yoga, which has 3 stages. All of it, we'll be discussing it in level 2. I do not want to confuse you now. But Bhakti Yoga has the ability to be continued in the consecutive janmas. You will have remembrance of it. Point number 1. Second, there is no compelling condition that I have to remember Bhakti Yoga in the next janma. There could be janmas where I may not remember. I could leave 2 janmas and in the 3rd janma I may remember Bhakti Yoga. Now Gajendra is incidentally in his previous janma a king called Indradyumna. Indradyumnaha Pandyakhandadirajaha Tvadbhaktatma, tells a poet. So he was a king of immense devotion to the Lord, and it is believed that at one point in time, Agastya Maharishi thought that he was being insulted, and he cursed that the king should be born an elephant. So this king in his previous janma had begun Bhakti Yoga. Now he is an elephant. So when he was tormented by the jaws of the crocodile, he remembered the Lord. So there are select people in this world. Remember this. This is a very important point. There are select people. We don't know who. 1 in 1,000, 1 in 1 lakh. We don't know. They are people who have the ability to remember their previous birth or births. They are referred to in philosophy as Jati Smaraha. Note down this point. So this Gajendra is a befitting example of Jati Smaraha, because he was able to remember the devotion to the Lord, and that devotion, what he had in his mind and heart, has been translated into Sanskrit verses by Shukabrahmam. Nevertheless, we know what happened then. The Lord came and rescued Gajendra from the jaws of the crocodile. So the elephant's foot was caught in the jaws of a crocodile. It thought of the Lord came and rescued. Simple storyline. But 2 important points that it answers from the philosophical angle is Vedanta angle is very important to us. I will be dealing with what is Bhakti Yoga in level 2. So that's not a part of our level 1. So as of now, you need to understand that Gajendra Moksha Vrittantam, it may seem like a Panchatantra tale, but it has a lot to do with Vedanta.
Namaskaram. I am very delighted and indebted to all my friends, well, the word is Sishya, for sincerely attending and relishing the content of our Vedic civilization. I hope this is just the beginning of a long journey we have. So, Bhāratiya Sāra Bodhani level 1, level 2 will come up subsequently, and there will be an intense course on the philosophy, the theology, the secrets of Rāmāyanam. Same is the case with Bhāgavatam and Mahābhāratam. So it's a journey that as a person who's going to dispense that knowledge, and as a student, a recipient, we'll all travel together. So in this journey, it becomes very important that I share what I know, what I have learned with you. And now that this is going to be a continuous process of dispensing knowledge, admissions, registrations for level 1 of Bhāratiya Sāra Bodhani is open for the subsequent batches. So my ardent request to all my dear Sishyas, the current Sishyas, would be to bring one student, one Sishya, a prospect Sishya from your family, one. If you have 2 or more, good. Tell your cousins, tell your relatives, tell your brothers and sisters. If my English is comprehensible, if the session is not very heavy, I'm sure even your parents and grandparents will like to listen to. As of now, the medium of delivery is English, simple English, Indian accent English. So we have over 20 nationalities listening, being registered Sishyas now. So for the subsequent batches, I would request you to kindly recommend more students to register, and let us travel this long journey together. Namaste.